Good morning, honorable members. The honorable member for South Beach will lead us to the throne of grace this morning.
Good morning, all. Jesus records in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6, 5 times he says, do not worry. We serve an all-powerful and limitless God. Our faith in Jesus Christ gives us the power to overcome the world. Beginning in chapter 6, verse 25, it is recorded, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more of value than they? Which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? Therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Let us pray. In the name of God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Lord, as we go through this post-Dorian and current COVID-19 budgetary exercise, give us new ideas and the courage to do things differently. Show us new vistas, wealth generation for our people. Give us the desire to free our nation from the jaws of lenders and oppressors. We release your spirit of truth, love, faith, brotherhood, creativity, abundance, productivity, caring and sharing. You have made us a chosen generation, anointed people. And we thank you that the Bahamas is the place where you live. Show forth your excellence. Thank you that you are lining up for us right now, people of the world who will bless us so that we too can become a blessing. Heavenly Father, we invoke your divine wisdom and omnipotent power upon our land. Great Inagua in the south to Walker's Key in the north. And all the islands and the people of this archipelago, we need you now. Grant to our Prime Minister the Jethro principles and cover our nation with the Chronicles proposition. Endow our people with Proverbs wisdom and bolden them with resistance against the forces that impede our beneficial advancement. Lord, we, your people, surrender to your miraculous healing power. You turned water into wine. You made the blind to see, passed the Red Sea, assisted Sarah in conceiving in her old age, and rained manna from heaven. You locked the lion's jaw for Daniel. You fed the multitude, walked on water. And you gave us the grace, the resurrection of your only begotten Son. And in these things, with faith and confidence, most gracious Lord, you taught us to pray as we say, Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Dr. Hubert Minute, Peter Turnsworth, Brent Simonet, Desmond Bannister, Renwood Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Dwayne Sands, Marvin James, Frankie Campbell, Vinicio D'Aguila, Michael Pintard, Darren Henfield, Ramal Ferreira, Lanisha Rose, Renzo Rose, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Lakeisha Parker Edgecombe, Hiram Lewis, Carlton Bolag, James Albury, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Saunders, Frederick McElpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Phelps, Miriam Reckley Emmanuel, Reese Shipman, Ruben Rami, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Dawn Cartwright, Chanel Ferguson, Glennis Hannah Martin, Pricewell Forbes, Chester People.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, I have one matter to bring to your attention on the document to table, and I will begin by tabling this document from the Office of the Auditor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It's the report of the Auditor General for the year ended the 30th of June, 2017. Order that the document do lie on the table. Second matter which I wish to bring to your attention is the strengthening access and benefit sharing virtual meeting that is scheduled for 10 a.m. on Friday. These documents will be copied and sent into the Parliament's group so that you would be able to download the necessary apps, and you would be given the access code to enter that meeting on Friday. The main purpose of this activity under legislation is to exercise the Bahamas' national sovereign right to control access to its genetic resources and the associated traditional knowledge of the communities by providing an enabling domestic legal framework for the implementation of the access benefit sharing. The benefits include community empowerment, poverty alleviation, food security, rural employment, agricultural diversification, climate change adaptation, local value adding, industrial development, research and development capacity development, regional and international trade, and technology transfer. And once again, all members, including senators, this document will be sent to you later this afternoon in the Parliamentary group so that you can avail yourselves of it. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Mr. Speaker, I rise in this honorable House on behalf of Bahamians everywhere, and more particularly, the good people of East Grand Bahama as a whole, Bimini, and the Abacos, who have and are struggling with the double catastrophic effects of a Category 5 hurricane and now a pandemic that threatens the entire archipelago and indeed countries around the world. Mr. Speaker, the last budget that I've had the honor to present has been about providing economic stability and recovering from past gross financial management or lack of fiscal restraint by the former administration. This budget is about providing support for the people of the Bahamas, creating new opportunities for our country, and setting the foundation for a strong, more resilient, and sustainable economy and society, which we theme from crisis to opportunity. This is perhaps the most important policy document published by any government in its fiscal year, the annual budget. It represents the values we hold dear as the government of the day, articulates the government's vision for the well-being of its people during ordinary and extraordinary times, and shares how the government plans to raise and spend public funds for the collective benefit of every man, woman, and child in the islands of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, this is not a time for soaring rhetoric or empty partisan crossfire. In the face of this historic, extraordinary times, the Bahamian people expect a plan, a strategy that is responsive to their needs and defined by the values we believe in as a party and as a government. My role today is not to lull the Bahamian people into a false sense. There will be no sugarcoating of the situation we face. I trust that the Bahamian people understand the challenges with which we are confronted because of COVID-19, which has changed the lives of every Bahamian in one way or another. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented budget. And today, Mr. Speaker, I will lay out the government's comprehensive budget plan for the fiscal year 2020-2021, explaining how we intend to address the pressing fiscal and economic realities we face as a country as we forge onward to restore our people and restore our nation. This budget is unlike any the Bahamas has ever seen before. Fittingly so, because the 12 months just passed have been unlike anything the country has ever experienced. From the onset, I want to be clear. The budget has 5 critical aims. It is about protecting the health and safety of Bahamians. It is about providing adequate social support to vulnerable members of our community. It is about stabilizing the domestic economy. It is about sustainable employment. And it is about accelerating our government reforms. These are not just theoretical ideas, Mr. Speaker. They are not simply aspirational. These priorities show exactly how we are investing public resources. What does this look like in practice? A feeding program that can reach more people for a longer period of time. An unemployment assistance program that puts cash in the hands of more than 20,000 people as a form of income replacement. In practice, it means supporting and growing more small businesses with grants and expanding investments, creating more jobs and securing more livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, what will be evident from this presentation of the 2020-2021 annual budget is a clear plan grounded in the realities of our circumstances, sensitive to the needs of the most vulnerable, guided by our priorities as a government, and designed to transform this crisis into an opportunity for our future prosperity. For the past 3 years, our objective has been to achieve sustainable economic growth over the medium and long term. A key component of our strategy has been fiscal consolidation, which is about taking public finances towards a balanced position over time through revenue enhancement and expenditure containment. While the economy was in growth mode, the government took the necessary steps to bring down the deficit and create a plan to contain our debt growth. We did this with great success, Mr. Speaker, establishing a track record of deficit reductions and fiscal responsibility. We did this while taking unparalleled steps to invest, first and foremost, in Bahamians. Let us not forget, this government made one of the most significant investments in education in Bahamian history through the implementation of a free educational initiative from preschool to university. That deserves a round. In this new budget, we are staying true to our promise to increase access to education with millions of additional resources directed towards free education for University of the Bahamas and BTVI students. We will continue to fund the Universal Primary Education Initiative to make quality preschool education more inclusive and accessible. Even with the current constraints we have, we are ensuring that Bahamians are prepared to maximize their participation in the transformed economy. Despite the continuous attempt by some to misrepresent our record, we proved our ability to shrink a significant deficit while affirming our commitment to our citizens. All the while, we made the records of our performance public in a way no other government has done before. As I suspect the question may come up from the opposition during the budget debate, I want to remind the opposition up front that this government launched the practice of releasing quarterly budget performance reports so that the members opposite and the Bahamian people can see exactly where the money is being spent. It is the most transparent action taken by any government when it comes to in-year budget performance reporting. This practice of transparency and accountability will continue as long as this administration has a say about it. Further, Mr. Speaker, we have brought this idea of transparency to life with a new approach to public engagement and outreach around the budget. While we still release the cumbersome book of draft estimates of revenue and expenditure, thanks to the hard work of the team at the Ministry of Finance, Bahamians can find straightforward, interactive, and visual representations of the budget information in ways that they have never had before. Transparency is not just about access to information. It is about making information accessible. In other words, plain to see and easy to understand. This is even more important, Mr. Speaker, with the budget this year, as many Bahamians are in their homes connecting virtually. I encourage Bahamians to connect with us through our website and social media for the facts about this budget. Mr. Speaker, it will be no surprise that this budget is largely defined by the economic emergency that has been thrust on us by the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic and the still rippling economic impact of the monstrous and catastrophic Hurricane Dorian. Together, these events have delivered the fastest, deepest economic shock to the Bahamas since the onset of the Second World War. Needless to say, these events have forced us to shift to a new course of action. COVID-19 has increased pressure on government revenues and on public expenditure. It has suppressed our exports sector, temporarily shut down our domestic economy, and dramatically slowed our short-term prospects for economic growth. This comes on the heels of an economy that was already just slowly recovering from a catastrophic hurricane. Because of current realities, the landscape we operate in has completely changed. It demands a different approach and a different set of solutions from the government. Even though our ultimate objectives have not changed, to achieve sustainable growth for both the medium and long term in the Bahamas, our short-term strategy and our overall thinking about the future has had to shift. Today, I will do my best to clearly detail our immediate plans for restoration, including our vision, our strategy, and the solutions we propose, so that the Bahamian people can fully understand the significance of the 2020-2021 budget. Mr. Speaker, while many countries are now on the precipice of economic desperation, fortunately, the Bahamas has been held up as a model in the region for its effective management of the crisis, particularly for our compassionate care for our people and of our structured reopening plan. The unprecedented impulses of this highly contagious and deadly virus has tested and shaken the foundation of even the largest and most well-resourced nations of the world. But here in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, I hope the entire House and the people of the Bahamas would agree. Our response, although not without stumble, has been remarkably comprehensive, targeted, compassionate, and effective. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say on this budget morning that this government did not waver in responding to the needs of the Bahamian people from the onset of this pandemic. For the 3 months to June, we allocated over $140 million in our policy response to COVID-19. As many of you are aware, this response included providing direct social assistance through the food and unemployment assistance programs, supporting employee retention with tax credits and deferrals directly to support the non-executive payroll expenses of impacted medium and large businesses, extending business continuity grants and loan support for small businesses, increasing funding allocations to the public health sector to ensure its readiness for the detection, treatment, and mitigation of the virus, and expanding subventions to the utility companies to support the bill payment waivers offered to impacted persons. To illustrate the extent of our initiative, as of mid-May, the National Insurance Board paid out some $6.2 million for the government-funded unemployment assistance program. We created this program to assist self-employed individuals who would not normally be eligible for an unemployment benefit from the National Insurance Board. Under the standard unemployment benefit scheme, NIB also paid out $28.8 million in benefit claims to those laid off as a result of the virus. This has covered just over 26,000 people since the end of March. For the business community, 284 small businesses were approved for loan financing, representing a collective $19.4 million in funding. Similarly, the government advanced the business tax credit and deferral initiative to minimize further private sector job losses. The Department of Inland Revenue approved 44 companies who collectively benefited from $5.7 million in tax credits and deferrals. These government loans, grants, and deferrals have protected roughly 5,400 vulnerable jobs. With respect to the health situation, the government has expended $3.1 million to construct a new COVID-19 support unit at the Princess Margaret Hospital, at the Rand Memorial Hospital, as well as additional beds at the Grand Bahama Cancer Association to accept overflow patients depending on the need. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister for his leadership and the entire citizens force of essential workers in the government, the private sector, and civil society. All who continue to carry us through so violently. I must at this point express our sincere thanks for the dedicated and committed work of many doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals, grocery workers, sanitation workers, bankers, and all essential personnel who work so hard and continue to work so hard on our behalf. Without them, colleagues, the response I just outlined would not have been possible. We will continue to rely on them, even as we have begun our 5-step phase reopening, because our work is far from over. Unfortunately, all too many Bahamians will continue to feel the hardship of these unprecedented times for weeks and months to come. Most sectors of our economy will take time to restart, and many businesses will need time to rebuild and rebound. The government's contributions to the economy will be a vital lifeline to keep the economic engine running and to deliver the impact we seek from our immediate restoration plan. Mr. Speaker, this administration is still very much committed to delivering a modern Bahamas that is resilient, dynamic, inclusive, and sustainable. However, we cannot fool ourselves about where we are today. COVID-19 has thrust the Bahamas and the world into this crisis, and we are still in the thick of the emergency. The 2020-2021 annual budget represents our answers now to the challenges we face today. In contrast to the medium and long-term recovery, our restoration plan demands that we take action that will have an immediate and meaningful short-term impact. We have named the budget Resilient Bahamas, a plan for restoration, because we seek to achieve the following objectives. 1, protect the well-being and engender the confidence of our citizens and residents, and indeed the wider international community. Maintain economic stability during the COVID-19 induced crisis, and plant the seeds of accelerated recovery. In doing so, we will transform this crisis into an opportunity for our economic and national revival. As mentioned at the opening, our approach is clear. 1, the government will not compromise public health and safety. 2, the government will not contribute to any further unemployment. 3, the government will not let its citizens go hungry. And 4, the government will do all that it can to stabilize the economy and prepare it for a strong and robust rebound. Mr. Speaker, this approach reflects the important value we place on national unity in times of crisis, the value we place on responsible, proactive, and forward-looking governance, and the inspiration we get from the resilient spirit of Bahamians. We maintain that this strategy is the best course of action to restore our nation from the ashes of this crisis. Turning to the global economy, Mr. Speaker, I now turn to an overview of global prospects and domestic performance, which set the macroeconomic context for fiscal performance in 2019, 2020, and projections for the 2020-2021 budget. The threat of COVID-19 is twofold, given its life-threatening public health ramifications and the associated economic outcomes. The pandemic has already triggered a downward revision of global growth prospects for 2020 and into 2021, and no sector has gone untouched. As a service-based economy, this is of particular importance to the Bahamas and will undoubtedly change the landscape for the upcoming 2020-2021 fiscal year. Prior to the outbreak of the coronavirus, global indicators signaled a slowdown in growth due to rising trade barriers, geopolitical and trade uncertainty, and macroeconomic strain in a number of emerging market economies, among other factors. This, compounded by a pandemic, which practically halted economic activity around the globe, underpinned a severe downturn in projected global output for 2020. According to the International Monetary Fund, World Economic Outlook for April 2020, global output is now forecasted to decline by 3% in 2020, a sharp turnaround from the 3.4% growth estimated in its October 2019 release. To put this into context, at the beginning of the budget communication last year, global output was projected to grow by 3.6%. In just 1 year, a lagging trade war, structural factors, fiscal tightening, and now a global pandemic has caused a 6.6% reversal in global projections for 2020. This is an outcome far worse than the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. These are certainly uncharted waters, not only for the Bahamas, but for the entire world. Mr. Speaker, the redeeming characteristics of this bleak and dire outlook is that the economic downturns related to pandemics are usually V-shaped. This means they begin with stark declines, but are generally followed by a relatively quick and robust recovery. As such, global growth is projected to rebound to 5.8% in 2021 as a result of policy support measures to underpin the return of economic activity. Mr. Speaker, as our key source market for tourism and primary trading partner, prospects for the United States are paramount to the fiscal and economic outlook for the Bahamas. Real GDP in the United States is anticipated to contract by 5.9% in 2020. Although there has been some relaxation of social distancing and economic shutdown measures across various states, it will take some time to reverse the adverse effects of diminished confidence. Nevertheless, the large stimulus package offered by the United States government and monetary measures taken by the Federal Reserve to expand liquidity are likely to provide a direct impetus to aggregate demand. These actions are posited to drive projections for 2021 that show a rebound in real GDP growth to 4.7%. But of course, these estimates remain uncertain. Similarly, the Eurozone area and the countries of the Pan-Pacific region all anticipate major economic fallout for the rest of 2020 and beyond. Mr. Speaker, all told, the prospects for the short to medium term reveal sharp contractions, followed by recoveries in the following year, barring any unforeseen shocks. In this environment, it has been acknowledged that robust financial and monetary policy support programs will be vital for all economies to rebound. Mr. Speaker, despite the passage of Hurricane Dorian in September 2019, the domestic economy upheld its growth momentum against the backdrop of robust activity in the 9 months leading up to the storm in a number of key sectors. Construction sector activity continued to be supported by several foreign direct investment projects of varying sizes, which accompanied a robust tourism season. In particular, performance in the tourism sector saw notable gains in the Family Islands that were not impacted by the September storm. Tourism arrivals exceeded $7 million in 2019, marking the highest level of arrivals recorded in the history of the Bahamas. Thank you, Minister. However, this momentum was interrupted by the initial impact from COVID-19 as the virus began to spread from China into the Western Hemisphere. In the first quarter of 2020, total visitors' arrivals declined by 14.7% to some 1.7 million visitors as compared to the same period of 2019. A categorical breakdown shows that the high value-added air segment fell by 28%, reflecting a slowdown in international travel amid virus fears and national border closures during the last week of March 2020. Sea arrivals decreased by 10.5% to 1.3 million, as cruise lines suspended all of their routes until June for some, and for others until November of 2020. Mr. Speaker, nevertheless, the modest yet positive pace of economic activity that prevailed prior to COVID-19 set the foundation for steadying our outturn for a number of our other economic indicators. In particular, the unemployment rate stabilized at 10.7% in December 2019 relative to November 2018. However, when compared to May 2019, the jobless rate increased from 9.5% to 10.7%, owing mostly to job losses associated with Hurricane Dorian. Specifically, the number of employed persons decreased to 152,640 in December from 215,000 in May 2019. Although international oil prices registered a slight rise coming towards the end of 2019, the recent low in global prices has spurred an associated decrease in domestic energy prices. In March, Brent crude prices decreased by 13.3% to $50.48 per barrel relative to April 2020. When compared to March 2019, oil prices registered a decline of 23.5% over the year. There were two main drivers of this: the coronavirus pandemic on the one hand, and a price war and oversupply on the other hand, due to the failure of the two largest producing members of OPEC to reach an agreement. This has transferred into price reductions in electricity bills for Bahamian consumers and businesses. The fuel charge by Bahamas Power and Light decreased by 36.3% to $11.32 per kilowatt hour in May 2020, as compared to May 2019. On a monthly basis, the fuel charge fell by 26.1%. Mr. Speaker, on the monetary front, both liquidity and external reserves were boosted by reinsurance inflows following Hurricane Dorian last September. By extension, overall money supply grew by 11% in 2019, exceeding the year earlier 1% expansion, and being underpinned by a buildup in private sector demand deposits in 2019. In addition, domestic credit showed a slight uptick, supported largely by a 3.1% rise in foreign currency credit, while Bahamian dollar credit grew marginally by 0.4%. Growth in Bahamian dollar credit was primarily explained by an increase in net claims on the government and credit to the private sector, the latter of which was cushioned by damaged repairs in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. As of this last Friday, May 22nd, external reserves stood at $1,986 million, which is equivalent to some 28 weeks of imports. This robust level of foreign reserves has been consistent from late February into March and has been sustained against the backdrop of the emergency power orders, which closed all non-essential businesses, thereby dampening demand for imports. It is anticipated, however, that once the economy reopens, there is likely to be a subsequent drawdown on reserves to respond to the rebound in consumer demand. The central bank, in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance, is working to ensure that the levels of external reserves remain at an adequate level to support the viability of the U.S. currency peg by facilitating the bulk of the deficit financing required in foreign currency. In light of the projected impact of COVID-19 on the international markets and its trickle-down effect on our domestic economy, which is highly vulnerable to external shocks, the central bank has forecasted that real GDP in the Bahamas will contract by some 12%. Mr. Speaker, with this snapshot of the domestic economy, it is clear that the outlook for the near term is very subdued, and our rebound will be heavily dependent on how quickly travel resumes. As sobering as this should be, we must also remember the nature of economic downturns related to pandemics. A sharp and sudden downturn followed by a strong recovery. Despite the stark declines we are seeing today in our various fiscal and economic indicators, we will move onward from this crisis. There are a number of independent economic indicators to give the Bahamian people hope and reassurance. Most recently, we have seen prospects for the near term that indicate an appetite for private sector investment. The cruise port's $130 million bond offering was oversubscribed when it was closed on May 18th. This signals that despite the uncertainty surrounding COVID-19, investors are confident in the tourism industry generally and the recovery of the cruise industry and revitalization of downtown Nassau in particular. Mr. Speaker, we can also look with pride and confidence at the entrepreneurial spirit of Bahamians and the way small businesses have sprung into action. With shifts in manufacturing, the adoption of digital platforms, and the growth of delivery services, Bahamian entrepreneurs are innovating to meet the new demand for products and services during this lockdown. Our values as an administration dictates that we take action to reinforce this entrepreneurial spirit, and this budget does just that. Mr. Speaker, now that the macroeconomic context has been set, I want to take this time to update this Honorable House and the Bahamian people on performance for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. At the time of the 2019-2020 national budget, I mentioned that this administration had envisioned our approved budgetary operations resulting in a fiscal deficit of approximately $137 million, or 1% of GDP, in line with our fiscal plan. After accomplishing a 67% reduction in the deficit since assuming office, we were indeed well on our way to achieving our established fiscal targets in our steady move towards a balanced budget. However, Hurricane Dorian swept through this nation only 2 months into the budget year and quickly derailed the approved estimates, which resulted in the tabling and approval of the supplementary budget. Mr. Speaker, up to the 9-month mark, the latest published and available monthly data, we are performing on target with the supplementary budget estimates, underpinned by what had proven to be a strong revenue performance and the rollout of a number of hurricane recovery and restoration measures. Given the robust level of economic activity in the first half of the fiscal year, despite the September storm, overall performance for the 9 months to March 2020 was relatively buoyant. Total revenue grew by $68.9 million, or 4.1% to $1.7 billion over the 9-month period, representing 73.4% of the budget as compared to the same period, fiscal year 2018-19. Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure front, recurrent expenses moved higher by $112.7 million, or 6.6% to $1.8 billion in the 9 months to March 2020, equating to 67.5% of the budget, being boosted by a union lump sum payment of $47.9 million, or 9.1% increase in compensation to employees. Recurrent expenses related specifically to Hurricane Dorian amounted to $14.1 million for the 9-month period, including $7.9 million in allowances to displaced civil servants, $2.7 million towards landfill operations, and $500,000 in food assistance. Further, the government paid an additional $48.4 million in fiscal year 2019-20 in arrears payments as of April 2020, just below 50% of the budgeted amount, bringing the total paid off since the beginning of the arrears program to a revised $230.1 million. To date, we are left with a balance of $85.5 million to repay from the more than $300 million backlog of old bills we met when we assumed office. Remarkable progress. tell them talk that. Capital outlays widened by $70.8 million, or 55.2% over the previous year to $198.9 million, or 51.6% of the budget. Primarily explained by hurricane-related spending. Specifically, approximately $20 million was earmarked for the rehabilitation of power supply in Abaco, with another $5.4 million spent on water restoration activities in the affected islands. An additional $13.1 million was allocated for debris removal and cleanup on both islands, and another $0.3 million, or $300,000, on machinery and equipment. Up to March 2020, the Small Business Development Center had disbursed approximately $2.9 million in loans for businesses affected by Hurricane Dorian in an effort to facilitate their reopening. This figure has since expanded to $3.4 million. Mr. Speaker, given these developments, the fiscal deficit widened to $255.9 million in the 9 months to March 2020, as compared to $140.3 million in the comparable period of fiscal year 2018-2019. This equates to some 37.8% of the revised budget. Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that the impact of COVID-19 has altered yet again the budget estimates for fiscal facing the brunt necessary steps to increase expenditure and forego revenues, which placed upward pressure on the overall fiscal balance. Total expenditure as a result of the assistance program for food, unemployment, and additional outlays to the Ministry of Health for the detection, treatment, and mitigation of the coronavirus are estimated to cost the government some $83.6 million between March and June of 2020. The tax credit and tax deferral employment retention program is anticipated to undergird some $60 million in revenue losses through the end of fiscal year 2019-2020. Taken together, the total revenues expected to decline to roughly $2.1 billion, and estimated expenditures to rise to some $2.8 billion at the end. Consequently, total government debt is forecasted at some $8.2 billion at end of June, or 67.9% of GDP, as compared to the estimated 64.4% at the time of the supplementary budget. Mr. Speaker, the substantial impact of COVID-19 on our economy has already generated reaction from the international markets. Standard & Poor's recently revised our sovereign debt rating down one notch to BB last month. Although this was expected, it is a prime example of why we are developing a robust and strategic recovery plan, so as to mitigate against future downgrades and the attendant negative elements that are attached to such. I would note here that the government is intent on focusing its debt management strategy over the medium term to effect the best benefit to the citizens of the Bahamas. In this light, we are in the process of a debt conversion for a number of loan facilities that will allow us to lock in fixed rates in a low interest rate environment. This should result in debt servicing savings even in the near term. Though it will not be easy, we can glean on the lessons from a number of our regional counterparts that it is better to address these issues sooner rather than later. To restore the fiscal affairs of our country, this administration will remain disciplined in its fiscal management over the medium to long term. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to an overview of the fiscal policy measures within this budget, which represent one aspect of our solution to the ongoing crisis. While I will speak to numbers in greater detail later, let me say up front that the Resilient Bahamas Plan will come as a necessary but unprecedented cost. What is at stake is the unquestionable need to protect the Bahamian people, stabilize our economy, and transform this crisis into an opportunity for national restoration. To do this, we expect to run a deficit of some $1.3 billion, or 11.6% of GDP in the new fiscal year. This imperative of investing in a strategy like the Resilient Bahamas Plan, coupled with the associated revenue loss from subdued business activity, will result in an unprecedented fiscal deficit. Mr. Speaker, we've come to this decision after careful consideration of many other options, including direct tax increases and draconian cuts in expenditure. However, there will be no tax increases, and let me say it again, there will be no tax increases. While there may be reductions in headcount due to retirements and expiring contracts for consultants and services, there will be no public sector layoffs. There will be no one left to fend for themselves while the economy is reeling from the worst slowdown in modern history. We will stand united with the Bahamian people in support of people and communities, businesses and consumers who are already feeling the strain. Mr. Speaker, we have studied the COVID-19 responses of prudent governments in the region and around the world. And as a result of COVID-19, most governments have found themselves in this very position of major deficit spending. Daily, as we watch international news, we see governments undertaking unprecedented spending measures. They, like us, recognize that a government has a unique mandate and responsibility in times of crisis, and we will do our part. This is not the ideal circumstances we find ourselves in. Far from it. It was just last November that I reported to this House the lowest fiscal deficit in the Bahamas in nearly a decade. Prior to Hurricane Dorian, we were talking about the strongest tourism arrival figures and decreasing unemployment as this government was fulfilling its promise to restore the economy. But after back-to-back monumental economic catastrophes, we find ourselves in a very different place and with a very different reality. We cannot be tepid in our response. There is a substantial cost to implementing the Resilient Bahamas Plan, but the prospects of doing nothing or doing too little would lead us to a much less desirable place. Here's why, Mr. Speaker. Last September, in one single swoop, Hurricane Dorian slashed an estimated $232 million from government revenue. And just several months after that, we are now contending with a global pandemic that has made the outlook for government revenue even more bleak, especially in the short term. We expect minimal to marginal contributions from our primary export sector, tourism, in the first 4 to 5 months of the fiscal year, even as we push for the responsible reopening of the tourism sector. We are foregoing millions in revenue from the continuation of Hurricane Dorian tax relief measures for the first half of the fiscal year, and we're providing an extension of tax incentives to help sustain employment and strengthen the domestic economy. And overall, it will take time for businesses to rebound and consumer confidence to return. When I presented the budget communication last year, we estimated the government would generate $2.6 billion in revenue. We are forecasting revenue of only $1.7 billion in this next fiscal year because of the dual external shocks of Dorian and COVID-19. That amounts to revenue that is down $900 million below where we were this time last year when the economy was experiencing positive and steady economic growth. And what does this all mean? Mr. Speaker, the impact of our revenue shortage is one of the reasons for the large deficit we are forecasting this year. The $900 million in lost revenue potential is equivalent to some 35% of total government annual spending on average. The fall off in planned revenue is an unparalleled blow from these unprecedented economic shocks. As you can see, we are not sugarcoating the severity of the situation we find ourselves in today and the important role this budget will and must play. Mr. Speaker, now to the expenditure side. We carefully considered our expenditure options and ultimately designed the Resilient Bahamas Plan in the way we have for the following reasons. One, we had to consider the fact that the public health threat is not behind us, and that future public health emergencies could spring up at any time. Global pandemics present an existential threat to the health and safety of Bahamians, and we believe that improving our national resilience in the public health sector is a spending priority that cannot be delayed because the health of our people is paramount. In our plan, we increased the public health allocation specific to COVID-19 response by $20 million. Two, dramatic cuts in government spending could result in a further contraction of the economy when it is already in a weakened state. We understand the role of government in a crisis and maintain that the government's ongoing contribution to commercial activity right now is a lifeline to many. In our plan, we made a conscious decision not to curtail spending in certain important areas, like education, and to allocate target increases for capital expenditure projects, small business development, and the social welfare spending. The allocations for the Department of Social Services budget, for example, will increase from $49 million to just over $60 million in fiscal year 2020-2021. The spike in unemployment across the world has left millions of people without their primary source of income. In the Bahamas, this has created hardship in our communities. More than 55,000 people have already filed for unemployment benefits and assistance with the National Insurance Board, representing over 30% of the workforce. This administration stands for the dignity of work. Our bond with citizens is defined by partnership, not paternalism. Therefore, in our plan, we allocate over $120 million to continue and expand the tax credit, tax deferral program to provide cash directly to businesses to fund their payroll expenses to help keep people employed. Our values also demand that no Bahamian is left hungry or without shelter and care. In our plan, we allocate over $85 million to ensure the social safety net is strong enough and wide enough to protect the well-being of each and every vulnerable Bahamian and resident. We gave thoughtful consideration of these options and how they impact the deficit. And we are confident that our proposed solution provides the best response to the demand of this time. Notwithstanding, the government is being judicious in its expenditure for all non-essential areas, and we have made substantial reductions in several areas of recurrent expenditure across all ministries. Our decreases are very targeted, as we are still fundamentally practicing expenditure containment. Towards this end, we have, for example, eliminated the assignment of red plate vehicles to ministers in order to utilize them in other areas of the public service. You can tell me. Canceled all international travel, except in essential and exceptional circumstances. Ended the practice of the House of Assembly providing breakfast and lunch. Reduced a number of allocations on discretionary items. Some 42, there'll be no two meats. Some 42 out of 58 agencies represented in the budget will see a reduction in their budgetary allocations this year. Additionally, the Last Supper. Additionally, a key focus of this administration will continue to be improving the efficiency and sustainability of state-owned enterprises, or SOEs. This is a project that cannot be delayed and must, in fact, be accelerated. Likewise, government ministries and departments must use technology and innovation to reduce costs and improve efficiency. Altogether, our revenue and expenditure measures and our policy initiatives will lift the country from the depths of crisis to the heights of opportunity. This unprecedented budget will meet the demands of these unprecedented times. This is our commitment to the Bahamian people. This is our comprehensive plan. Mr. Speaker, here is a detailing of the fiscal policy measures within this budget. The economic support measures from the fallout of COVID-19 pandemic will continue to be a priority for the government. We are allocating over $250 million to extend and expand the initiatives we implemented in early March into the first half of the upcoming fiscal year. These measures include $48 million for continued unemployment assistance for persons who remain dislocated, $17 million in increased social welfare spending to provide expanded food assistance through the government's food voucher initiative, as well as to support the expansion of other support programs at the Ministry of Social Services. As a new measure, we will also fund a temporary incremental monthly increase of $50 in the old age pension administered by the National Insurance Board. And this to aid the elderly who may be dependent on other family members that are now jobless because of the pandemic. NIB is working on a rollout date for this program and will communicate with the public when it begins. $20 million in contingency funding allocation for the public health sector support to ensure sufficient funding for the ongoing detection, treatment, and mitigation of COVID-19 in the Bahamas. This will cover the cost for medical equipment and supplies, ensuring sustainable quarantine facilities if needed, and other measures to make certain that this country is fully equipped to combat the spread of the virus. Mr. Speaker, I have to go back and repeat one more time because I believe it's so important for pensioners. In this new measure, we will also fund a temporary incremental monthly increase of $50 in the old age pension administered by the National Insurance Board. $30 million to expand the business support and continuity loan program for Bahamian entrepreneurs and small businesses. In addition to the expenditure element noted above, as mentioned earlier, the government is seeking to defer up to $120 million in tax collections to extend and expand the tax credit and tax deferral program, allowing all VAT-eligible businesses to access tax credits and waivers for a period of 3 months to cover payroll for management and line staff. As with the Business Continuity Program, this tax credit and deferral program is provided on the condition that business use the proceeds primarily to meet payroll needs and to keep people employed. In addition to the expanded allocations to address COVID-19 pandemic, the government is increasing its allocation to National Health Insurance, or NHI, by $18 million. When the Prime Minister discusses his health portfolio during the upcoming budget debate, he will speak in detail of the successes that NHI has had to date and how its expansion will both improve the delivery of health care and rationalize the operations and efficiencies in the healthcare sector. Primary care delivery is estimated to cost the government $83.3 million each year. Without significant change to the delivery model, this would escalate to $127.7 million by 2025, an increase of $44.4 million. The integration and streamlining of these separate healthcare delivery systems are essential to ensure better quality care of patients. Therefore, the government is proposing for the National Health Insurance Authority to lead a series of reforms which would effectively and efficiently address the ongoing challenges. Their refocused NHI initiative will require no additional taxation or employee mandate. Most importantly, it will ensure that every Bahamian and resident has consistent access to a family doctor with minimal copay requirements or deductibles. As the changes crystallize, this new streamlined approach is estimated to save the government of the Bahamas approximately $62 million over the next 5 years. The enhanced national health insurance would help us to move to a more efficient and accountable approach, and more importantly, expand primary health care coverage to every Bahamian. Given that allocations to the Public Health Authority represents our largest subvention to SOEs or state-owned enterprises, the government cannot give effect to reform in the SOE sector without determining how it will make delivery of basic health care more efficient and effective. Mr. Speaker, the combination of these economic support measures are critical elements of our strategy, guided by our strategic priorities to enhance public health and safety, expand social protection, sustain employment, strengthen the domestic economy, and accelerate government reforms and national resilience. Mr. Speaker, as one would imagine, the scope for significant tax reductions is marginal in a situation such as the one we find ourselves in. Nonetheless, and consistent with specific policy priorities, we do propose the reduction of taxes in a few targeted areas. Although pressed to take a conservative approach to government revenue taxes, we are delivering a guided and focused package of relief measures and incentives. A full schedule will be published detailing the items to be included in all of the listed categories. However, here are some of the key elements. For the agriculture and fisheries industry, we will reduce the duty on fishing materials from 45% to 20%, effective July 1st, 2020. Some of these items include fishing rods, reels, lines, tackles, and other materials. We are also reducing the duty on farming equipment for the use of backyard farming from 25% to 10%. And some of these items include, in this package, are spades and shovels and workbenches, machetes and heads, shears, and etc. In an effort to spur construction activity and thereby mobilize domestic capital, we are reducing the duty on all building materials to 20%, down from 45%. This includes, but is not limited to wood, glass, granite, steel, electrical supplies and fixtures, carpet, landscaping material, and plumbing material. To support the ongoing Hurricane Dorian recovery, we will extend the Special Economic Recovery Zone Order 2019 to December 2020 in the first instance, which will include all concessions currently available to the qualifying islands. Let me just say that again for people in Abaco and Grand Bahama in particular. To support the ongoing Hurricane Dorian recovery, we will extend the Special Economic Recovery Zone Relief Order 2019 to December 2020 in the first instance, which will include all concessions currently available to the qualifying islands. For the period January 1, 2021 to June 30, 2021, the concessions will be extended to cover building materials only. So let me repeat, Abaco and Grand Bahama will continue to enjoy the current VAT and duty-free exemptions through the end of this fiscal year and on building materials only until June 30, 2021. We're working on regular. We are removing the duty from nitrile examination gloves, antibacterial gloves, which are used as personal protective equipment to make it less costly for hospitals, companies, and individuals to acquire these. For a period of 1 year, we will remove the duty on other PPE items, such as gowns and other surgical supplies, to ensure our healthcare workers, both private and public, are protected as we continue to fight this pandemic. We're expanding the tax-free transfer of land where there is no change in beneficial ownership with the approval of the VAT controller. We're also reducing duty on a few items to further encourage the adoption of more green technologies and plastic eliminations, including duty reductions on environmental sea trash cans to assist in oceanic conservation, and reusable metal water bottles from 45% to 10%, and duty reductions on motorcycles with an engine size of 125 cc or less, and electric motorcycles from 75% to 10%. Off-road motorcycles will not be included in this reduction. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we are pleased to announce that for the first time, the government will provide for a back-to-school VAT holiday on school supplies, clothing, and selected food items for the 2 weeks leading to the reopening of schools, thereby providing millions. And that bears repeating. We are pleased to announce that for the first time, the government will provide for a back-to-school VAT holiday on school supplies, clothing, and selected food items for the 2 weeks leading to the reopening of schools, thereby providing millions of dollars in savings in the aggregate for parents across the country as they prepare students to return to school. I would note that the tax exemption of the VAT holiday will only apply to items that are bought inside the country and not those that are imported directly into the country. Mr. Speaker, just as we want to support Bahamian parents in this costly annual undertaking, we also want to support local business. And so we, Mr. Speaker, want to encourage you and all Bahamians to shop at home. Again, a full schedule will be published detailing the items scheduled for duty and tax reductions. Mr. Speaker, to achieve our medium-term fiscal goals, we will also be implementing a number of revenue enhancement measures in the 2020-2021 budget. These are mainly prescribed for non-essential goods, as not to further exacerbate the financial burden of those impacted by Hurricane Dorian and COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, over time, it is common for governments to review the fee structure within their branches to ensure that fees reflect modern-day efficiencies and inflation adjustments. A recent thorough review of our existing fee structure has resulted in a small increase in a few fees, including some storage fees at customs and a new optional category of custom-ordered license plates. We are introducing vanity license plates at the Road Traffic Department at a fee of $200 for a set. These are completely optional and will allow persons who wish to have customized license plates the option to choose their own combination of letters and numbers for a fee. Decency and moral considerations taken into account. Mr. Speaker, to help offset the revenue loss associated with the economic fallout and our tax relief measures, I mentioned earlier that we have, where possible and prudent, effected a reduction in the discretionary spending across most government agencies. In this vein, ministries were asked to prioritize spending related to COVID-19 response and Hurricane Dorian recovery, and to defer non-essential projects which do not directly impact employment for future consideration. All agencies were also asked to prioritize programs that would retain jobs and boost new job creation to the greatest extent possible. Hence our push to expedite a number of capital projects that can be easily rolled out to support this objective. This push to support national employment will help to support economic activity over the near term, which is critical as the economy emerges slowly from the shutdown. In addition, we have begun discussions with the relevant unions with a view to seek their support for the pausing of all increments to permanent and pensionable civil servants, as well as temporarily suspending salary increases and deferring salary increases attended to promotion exercises. To be clear, the intent will still be to process and grant promotions, as we recognize that some are long overdue. However, the attendant salary increases will be deferred at least until January 2021, when we will have a better view of the circumstances. Similarly, any new appointments will happen on an exceptional basis only. We will also be reviewing all consultancies to determine which can be deferred or canceled. Retirees will be allowed to naturally complete their engagements and will not be renewed over the next year. However, these measures will be monitored and may be adjusted as the economic and fiscal situation develops, including the payment of back pay related to any promotions as well as increments. Mr. Speaker, over the past year, we have made some strides in preparing the groundwork for the reform of state-owned enterprises. However, the need to accelerate this reform has become even more abundantly clear with the added pressure of COVID-19 relief on public funds. For fiscal year 2019-2020, state-owned enterprises subventions represent nearly 16% of recurrent expenditure, notwithstanding additional outlays due to the impact of Hurricane Dorian. This level of subvention is simply not sustainable. Thus, we have asked all state-owned enterprises to implement a mix of cost savings and revenue enhancement measures this budget year. As a result, we are budgeting to receive some 10%, or roughly $21 million in savings from a decrease in subventions to these entities. Over the medium term, it is the intent of the government to further rationalize these entities. The main objective is to push state-owned enterprises to become self-sufficient, thereby alleviating the need for the central government to subsidize their operations on an annual basis. To this end, we have targeted a $100 million annual reduction in subventions over the next 4 years as these entities move to optimize efficiency and cost recovery strategies. These cost recovery strategies may include the introduction of user fees in some cases, or an increase in existing fees for other SOEs as a way to enhance revenue. Similarly, some state-owned enterprises may opt to adopt cost reductions, such as merging, reducing operating costs, or revamping services with a view to eliminating non-efficient services. Given the host of policy measures I've laid out, I wish to return to a more detailed look at the budget numbers and assumptions associated with the fiscal outlook for 2020-2021. In November of last year, the government invoked the Exceptional Circumstances Clause 13 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, which allowed for a temporary departure from the prescribed fiscal targets given the impact of Hurricane Dorian. As such, we presented within the 2019 Fiscal Strategy Report a fiscal adjustment plan, which envisioned a return to compliance with a fiscal deficit ratio of 0.5% within 5 years or by fiscal year 2024, 2025. However, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has presented yet another exceptional circumstance for the government, which now calls for a new fiscal adjustment plan. Notwithstanding, it is especially challenging to predict the economic impact of this crisis and how it will affect our fiscal outcomes as developments change on a day-to-day basis. As such, the government will be in a position to provide a more detailed analysis in its upcoming 2020 fiscal strategy report, and additional information is available on the performance of the real economy. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal outlook for 2020-2021 is framed within the context of the global pandemic and the lagging impact of Hurricane Dorian, which would have been built into our forecast at the time of the first adjustment plan. However, in the following years, our projections are based on the assumed pace of economic recovery in conjunction with the government's medium-term socio-economic agenda. As mentioned earlier, in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, revenue performance was revised downward by some $232 million for fiscal year 2019-2020, but performed relatively buoyant despite subdued economic activity in the affected islands. However, the associated impact of COVID-19 has further weakened activity, which has negatively impacted revenue receipts from throughout the Bahamas. We are hopeful that the downward trend in new COVID-19 infections will permit the country to reopen by July 1st, as foreshadowed by the Prime Minister. We recognize, however, that even should we meet this milestone, the ramp-up of the tourism trade will likely be slow. While we remain hopeful that we can fill our resorts, hotels, bonefish lodges, marinas, and vacation rentals immediately upon reopening, we are taking a more restrained view in our projections and modeling. As such, we anticipate total revenue for fiscal year 2020-2021 of some $1.7 billion, which represents a $328.1 million or 15.7% decline over the projected outcome for fiscal year 2019-2020. I want to take this time to state again that the government will not be increasing taxes or introducing new taxes in this budget. Despite the projected weak performance in revenue, we are cognizant of the fact that this is not the right climate for increased taxation. It is our considered view that any such move would significantly slow down the timeliness of an economic rebound. Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure front, outlays are anticipated to feature continued spend for hurricane rebuilding efforts, coupled with new outlays for measures related specifically to COVID-19. As noted earlier, these measures total nearly $136 million. Thus, we have reduced a number of discretionary spending line items. This has meant that some 42 agencies and departments are receiving reduced budget allocations for the upcoming fiscal year. To reiterate what I mentioned earlier, we are mindful not to cut spending in critical areas. Allocations to the Department of Public Health, for example, which now has its own head in the budget, total $45 million. This paired with the allocation to the Ministry of Health constitute funding of over $300 million to the public healthcare system in the upcoming budget, an increase in allocation of $18.5 million from the previous year. As a result, we have budgeted recurrent spending of $2.6 billion, which is $35.3 million, or 1.4% higher than the revised budget sum of $2.5 billion for the supplementary budget. Comparatively, capital expenditure will feature a number of projects which support hurricane restoration as we continue to rebuild Grand Bahama and Abaco. In addition, the government will be maintaining its investments in education to ensure that all eligible Bahamians are able to access free tuition from preschool to university. In fact, we have increased the allocation for the University of the Bahamas Scholarship Initiative by $1.5 million and the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute by some $500,000 in anticipation of an increase in enrollment as these tertiary institutions have signaled an increase in applications in the aftermath of COVID-19. Further, we will expand our investments in hospitals and clinics, roadworks and civil projects across the Commonwealth to boost critical infrastructure and generate near-term job opportunities. All told, we are boosting capital spending to total $515.5 million, which is equivalent to a $190 million or 58.4% increase over the projected outturn of fiscal year 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, given these developments, the fiscal deficit is budgeted at some $1.3 billion, or 11.6% of GDP for the upcoming fiscal year. This is the largest deficit to be incurred by any government in the history of the Bahamas. That is a fact. This is indeed a testament to the monstrous impact Hurricane Dorian and COVID-19 has leveled back to back on our small, open economy. Almost uniformly, all countries of the region, and indeed the world, are facing similar fiscal situations, and in almost every instance, they are responding with expanded deficit funding to meet critical COVID-19 healthcare needs, to expand their social welfare spending, to keep their people employed, and to keep their economies stable. While we have sought to trim where we could, our driving ethos has been to do all we can to support Bahamians and to maintain as much employment and economic activity as we can over the near term. During this time, the government could have chosen to continue its fiscal restraint measures by cutting back spending and starving a deprived economy. However, we did not choose this route, as we appreciate that during a downturn, government spending is crucial to reviving a downtrodden economy. Again, these are unprecedented times that have called for unprecedented measures, and we are intent on ensuring the efficiency and efficacy of our outlays in line with our overarching fiscal responsibility objectives. The corresponding government debt level is expected to rise to $9.5 billion, equating to roughly 82.8% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, over the medium-term horizon, it is anticipated that aggregate revenue will gradually rebound to its pre-hurricane and pre-COVID-19 levels over the next 2 fiscal years. This will place revenue at some 20% of GDP by fiscal year 2022-2023, before increasing to roughly 21% of GDP over the longer-term horizon. To do this, the government will have to keep up its track record of economic growth and its success in improving revenue collections. Recurrent expenditure at some 22.4% of GDP in the upcoming fiscal year is expected to remain relatively stable over the next 2 fiscal years, before tapering off slightly to 21% in fiscal year 2022-2023. Capital outlays are anticipated to decline from 4.5% in the upcoming fiscal year to steady around 2% over the medium term, which is in line with the government's broader fiscal policy objective to make better use of private-public partnerships and to secure private financing for public projects. That being said, the fiscal deficit is forecasted to decline from 11.6% in the imminent fiscal year to 6.7% in the subsequent years, with a further reduction to 2.9% in fiscal year 2022-2023. As mentioned earlier, we will deliver a more detailed timeline in the 2020 Fiscal Strategy Report. However, early estimates project that the government is now likely to achieve its 0.5% fiscal ratio target no earlier than fiscal year 26-27, some 2 years beyond the first fiscal adjustment plan. During this time, we are keen to ensure that our recovery is supported by the necessary fiscal reforms in the important area of taxation, pension, and state-owned enterprise operations, and removal of the structural obstacles to economic growth that would spur both domestic and foreign direct investment opportunities for the objective of promoting job creation and wealth. Mr. Speaker, as a forward-looking government, this administration is not using the current situation as an excuse to pause or delay much of the critical reform efforts necessary to reform and reposition the Bahamas. Indeed, we must do all we can to set the stage for a dynamic and resilient rebound of the Bahamian economy. We are not going to back to business as usual. Instead, we are setting the stage for a transformed Bahamas. This budget will still champion the means to innovate and improve our government framework so as to both broaden and strengthen institutional capacity and productivity across our archipelago of islands. As a government, it is our mandate and innate duty to ensure the interconnectedness of each sector of the economy is supported by a robust and modern platform that ultimately sets the stage for a sound and progressive economy. I will now turn to an overview of the policies this administration believes will energize this agenda. We set out an objective 3 years ago to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and our investments to date have made that environment for entrepreneurship stronger than ever before. We have increased the capital budget allocation for small business growth and development from $5 million last year to $55 million in the new budget. We are pleased to see the entrepreneurial spirit of Bahamians has been awoken, because now people have confidence in the programs available to support their ambitions. This is largely thanks to the work of the Small Business Development Center and its partners. The SBDC will continue to innovate by exploring ways to leverage the government's investments to make other forms of capital available to Bahamians, such as private equity through angel investing and crowdfunding. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, or MSMEs, make the economy more resilient as they stay ready, nimble, and poised to adapt even more so than large economies and companies. When the economy needed delivery services, MSMEs sprung into action. The economy needed quick access to online markets. The MSMEs provided online solutions for other MSMEs. Rental car companies pivoted by using their cars for deliveries. Tailors and seamstresses pivoted to making masks. They turned a byproduct, scrap fabric, into a new source of revenue. In this time of crisis, the determination, foresight, and ability that characterizes MSMEs have proven beneficial for all Bahamians. Our approach to this budget is very focused and targeted. And we have chosen to continue our historic investment in MSMEs to further strengthen the domestic economy and plant the seeds for greater participation in the eventual recovery. Mr. Speaker, to push towards a digital transformation, particularly within the public sector, has been a priority of this administration from the onset. While the leading motive for this transformation was to drive competitiveness by reducing the cost of doing business with the government, these motives have since expanded. Put simply, the COVID-19 pandemic has transformed that pointed goal to an absolute imperative. We saw the explosion of digital commerce in the Bahamas in response to the curfews and lockdowns necessary to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Even when the virus posed no threat, the transition to digital commerce will remain. Hence, this government's push towards a national digital transformation comes at no better time than the present. To date, this government has advanced its digital agenda to the conversion from the old electronic customs automated system, ECAS, to the new electronic single window at the Customs Department, the digitization of passport registration at the Passport Office, and the ongoing revamp of the real property tax system, which will allow for complete automation of the existing system. We project this year that the digitization will extend at a minimum to the Road Traffic Department, the Office of the Registrar General, and Immigration. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that although the government, the private sector, and the banking sector have all been working towards greater use of digital transactions for payments, these efforts have often been siloed, running on separate tracks and moving at different paces. The lessons of Dorian and presently of COVID-19 have demonstrated that as a matter of national priority, the various stakeholders need to collaborate and move in unison to accelerate the adoption of digital payment systems. Yes, it is a matter of national efficiency and national competitiveness. But as recent hurricanes and the current pandemic have shown us, it is also a matter of national security. Thus, I'm pleased to advise that the Ministry of Finance, together with the Clearing Banks Association and the Central Bank, have established targets to reduce cash and check utilization across the country as follows. A 50% reduction in the utilization of cash within the next 5 years, fueled by more transparent business and consumer-friendly regulations around the use of debit and credit cards and the full integration of the sand dollar. A 50% reduction of the utilization of checks in 3 years, an 80% reduction in 5 years, boosted by greater utilization of the electronic clearinghouse to allow for direct payments. Setting these targets and establishing a task force to make this happen will ensure that we can, in a measurable way, determine our success in removing the legal, bureaucratic, and even cultural obstacles in the crucial shift to digital transactions. The aims of this initiative is not just to eliminate the use of cash. Cash will continue to be a feature of the payment system. However, the further entrenchment and utilization of digital means has the opportunity to expand financial inclusion, to open new business opportunities, to bring sophisticated financial services to even the most remote parts of the country, and to improve personal and business security. The work of the eminent task force will be to engage business communities and civil society to ensure appropriate attention to privacy, cyber security, as well as to ensure a proper understanding and buy-in of this initiative by the general public. Mr. Speaker, an essential pillar to our transformational socio-economic agenda is to achieve and optimize energy efficiency by incorporating the use of renewable resources. The imperative of this objective was reinforced by the passage of Hurricane Dorian, which left Abaco and Grand Bahama without electricity for weeks. To start the introduction of transformative measures to modernize the energy sector, the government is seeking in its 2020-2021 borrowing resolution approval for an $80 million loan with the Inter-American Development Bank to progress the solarization in the Family Islands. This is a part of the $170 million contingent credit line for investment projects, or CCLIP, facility over 8 to 10 years that was foreshadowed in last year's budget communication. Not only will this improve our energy infrastructure's reliability and resilience to natural disasters invoked by climate change, but it will also help to rehabilitate critical infrastructure. A key element of phase 1 of the CCLIP program will be the introduction of rooftop solar installations in public buildings, as well as the start of commercial solar installations across the Family Islands, and Ragged Island would be aware. Once completed, this will achieve fiscal savings for the government by lowering the monthly electric bill for public buildings, as well as decreasing the level of subsidizing required by New Providence to power the Family Islands. Of course, the ultimate goal is to reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuels, thus eliminating greenhouse gas emissions and reducing our national fuel import bill. In the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, and now in the midst of COVID-19, the government has had to make sizable investments and interventions in the energy sector. Firstly, we committed to covering the cost of electrical restoration in Abaco, which included the conversion of a portion of Abaco to underground lines, thereby increasing the reliability of electrical restoration in the aftermath of a natural disaster. To date, Bahamas Power and Light, BPL, has spent and committed some $27 million to this initiative. When done, the restoration of electricity in Abaco is expected to cost some $90 million. In addition, as detailed in the last budget communication, we will begin the $17.1 million street light retrofitting project shortly, which is being spearheaded by BPL. This will also support our green energy efforts with its use of LED lighting, ultimately resulting in cash savings to the government and a lower fuel import bill as well. Mr. Speaker, although these initiatives towards solarization and renewable energy will certainly help to modernize the existing energy mix and lead to a gradual decline in domestic energy prices, this government is also minded to capitalize on the opportunity to lock in a number of benefits associated to the current environment of low international oil prices. Specifically, BPL, in collaboration with the government, is actively pursuing a hedging arrangement with the assistance of the IDB. This facility will bring fuel price certainty to BPL, allowing it to lock in reduced fuel surcharges even when oil prices inevitably rebound. This will mean lower average electricity bills for all BPL customers. All told, the government will have invested over $200 million towards energy reform through its support to BPL and loans from multilateral institutions towards this initiative. We are intent on transforming the energy sector in the Bahamas from its existing antiquated and vulnerable state to a more sustainable and efficient sector through the use of renewable resources. Mr. Speaker, as a nation, the Bahamas imports over 90% of what it consumes. In 2018, our total imports valued some $3.5 billion, the bulk of which comprised the machinery and transport equipment, food, and fuel. This equates to 33% of our average real GDP over the last 5 years. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the importance of pursuing food security, to ensure that we could meet some of our domestic needs, at least in the short term, and expanding over the long term, and thereby reducing our dependence on imports. Indeed, the lockdowns enforced by countries around the world have triggered a slowdown in harvest, cutbacks in exports, and other factors that could disrupt the supply chain. Thus, it is now imperative that we as an island nation begin to revolutionize the way we view food security and sustainability. According to the Department of Statistics, agriculture, forestry, and fishing accounted for less than 1% of real GDP, while manufacturing accounted for some 2.8%. Thus, in essence, the local production of food and other items in the domestic economy was equivalent to less than 4% of GDP. As a country surrounded by water, with a myriad of family islands with mass land availability, there is no reason why we cannot create, implement, and cultivate a 21st century plan to increase local production to sustainable levels, thereby decreasing, and in some cases, completely eradicating our persistent dependence on imports for consumption, while creating jobs within our economy. To materialize this vision, the government is considering a number of plans to increase the support of local farmers, particularly in the family islands. The Department of Agriculture and Marine Resources has already signaled that it is working diligently with local producers and domestic importers to closely monitor any further supply chain disruptions. This has birthed the Emergency Food Production Plan, which the Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources would have outlined in this Honorable House last month. This $1.6 million investment in food security in the Bahamas will support the purchasing of hydroponic and backyard kits and the provision of farm inputs. The Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources has commissioned a task force to address food security and substitution. The government will also consider recommendations made to it on this subject matter by or through the Economic Recovery Committee. I can assert today that this government will make food security and sustainability a key priority over the short to medium term as a policy that will add value for years to come. To kick off the push for greater food security, the Ministry of Agriculture has been allocated between its current and capital budget the sum of $9 million to begin to seed new and innovative projects in partnership with Bahamian farmers and the broader private sector. This will indeed secure the future of Bahamians and the wealth of our nation.
Honorable member, just a moment, please.
Member for East Grand Bahama.
No, this isn't a sit-down communication. This will indeed secure the future of Bahamians and the wealth of our nation. The Ministry of Agriculture will expand further during his contribution to the debate. Mr. Speaker, now more than ever, it is critical that Bahamians are able to have trust and confidence that their hard-earned tax dollars are being managed in a fair, prudent, and transparent way, particularly in a post-COVID-19 environment. In this light, the government is advancing a number of legislative changes to support public financial management reform. Specifically, I am pleased to announce that the draft Public Financial Management Bill is now under final review by the external consultants. Once that review is completed, the bill will go to Cabinet before being released for public consultation and subsequent tabling in this Honorable House in early fiscal year 2020-2021. Similarly, the Public Debt Management Bill has been vetted in concert with the Public Financial Management Bill, as there are a number of sections where the two intertwine. This bill is now also with external consultants for final review, after which the document will be forwarded for cabinet approval and released for public consultation and finally tabled in this honorable house. Lastly, the draft public procurement bill has already gone through the public consultation phase and will be presented this morning along with the budget bill to this honorable house. We are pleased with the progress being made on these pieces of draft legislation and are confident that they will enhance the state of the public finances once implemented. Mr. Speaker, as I move to close, I want to reiterate that the 2020-21 budget was curated under circumstances far more extraordinary than any other budget cycle. The Bahamian people should rightly want to know why the government finds itself projecting such a high deficit of $1.3 billion. The answer is relatively straightforward. It is because the alternative approach and options are much worse. It is a lot easier to keep a person afloat than fighting to drag them back to the surface. Our economy is like that. We are investing in our restoration plan to avoid a dramatic scale back that would submerge the economy and leave Bahamians out at sea without any benefit and without a life raft. We are borrowing to keep Bahamian families, communities, and businesses above water and to keep the economy afloat as we see our way through this extraordinary time. Like most countries, we have had to set aside our fiscal targets to be responsive to the crisis we face. We've had to run major and unplanned deficits, to invest in heretofore unforeseen public health and social partnership programs. But we do not do so idly. We do not do so lightly. We are committing the funding to support displaced workers, to support budding entrepreneurs and established businesses. We are budgeting the resources to stimulate the economy through necessary civil work. We are accelerating the pace of recovery efforts in Grand Bahama and Abaco with the support of economic and physical infrastructure rehabilitation and new builds. We are pressing towards digitizing the public service and support the rollout of the Sand Dollar digital currency. And we are expanding and extending the innovative initiatives that we launched in the current fiscal year with millions of additional resources directed towards our preschool to university free education strategy and our growth plan for the small business sector. We believe wholeheartedly that this deliberate policy mix of proactive measures and broader stabilizing initiatives embodied in this budget will provide the timely and targeted support that Bahamians and residents need, and will provide the necessary framework for a strong and robust rebound. The biggest set of twin setbacks in the last 100 years calls for the biggest fiscal response in 100 years. And while we pray to Almighty God that we will not face compounding challenges like this again, we are prepared to face head-on the hardships of this moment. When we emerge from this crisis, the government will return to the success of our fiscal consolidation plan, treating this juncture in our national story as an anomaly, not as a license to engage in fiscal indiscipline. Mr. Speaker, that is our vision, and that is our plan as we lay this 2020-2021 budget. As burdensome as things seem, Mr. Speaker, we can also draw inspiration from the resilient spirit of the Bahamian people and find confidence in the fact that our economy remains viable and structurally sound. This is a response to two unprecedented historic events in the lifetime of our country. That we ask each and every Bahamian and resident across our archipelago of islands to trust in that resilient spirit and to lean on each other as a family, community, and nation. We have every confidence in the decisions taken and the plan we've put in place to create opportunity out of this crisis. Mr. Speaker, we recognize and accept that this is a very difficult budget. We know that our present circumstances can be worrisome to some, particularly the most vulnerable in our community. But we must find a way and summon the courage to surmount them. I believe the road ahead will not be easy, as it will not be for our regional peers and even developed countries around the world. We will remain in a state of some form of triage for a while before achieving stabilization. And we will need to be prepared to make some tough decisions, if necessary, to achieve this objective. But, Mr. Speaker, God is still in control. And relying on this support and our faith, we emerge stronger, battle-tested, and armed to move forward, upward, and onward, together. Mr. Speaker, God bless our Bahama land. And Mr. Speaker, Bahamians, the residents, it is still the people's time. Thank you.
Thank you, member. The document to be brought up. Order that the document be brought up.
You look very familiar. It's amazing. I've seen it a couple times.
Order the document do lie on the table.
No, I'm sure.
Statements and communications by ministers. Pardon? Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
There are no further statements and communication by.
Will you yield for 1 second, Bamboo Town? Member for East Grand Bahama, are there any other documents that you should lie on the table? Order that the documents be brought up.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for that. Mr. Speaker, I now beg leave to lay on the table of the House the budget communication, the annual budget draft estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2020-2021.
Order the documents be brought up. What are the documents to lie on the table?
Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Business License Provisional License Order 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further reading.
The Disaster Reconstruction Authority Act Special Economic Recovery Zone Relief Order 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further document.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Securities Industry Corporate Governance Amendment Rules 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table.
Mr. Speaker,
Further.
I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Securities Industry Takeover Amendment Rules 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further.
Mr. Deputy, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Securities Industry's Contract for Differences Rules 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further. Line.
Mr. Deputy, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Securities Industry's Fees Amendment Rules 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further line.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Financial and Corporate Service Providers Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Amendment Rules 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further lying about.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Securities Industry Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Amendment Rules 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further laying of document.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Securities Industry Amendment Regulations 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table.
Speaker,
Further laying of document.
Mr. Deputy, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Customs Management Amendment Regulations 2020.
Order the document be brought up. Order the documents to lie on the table. Further laying of documents, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Direction 2020, Bahamas Registered Stock number 2, 2021.
Order the document be brought up. Order the documents to lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Directions 2020, Bahamas Registered Stock number 3, 2021.
Order the document be brought up. Order the documents to lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Directions 2020, Bahamas Registered Stock 2040 and 2050.
Order the documents be brought up. Order the documents to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Speaker, Deputy, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time. Oh, sorry. Oh,
Yeah, we'll go to first reading.
Further
Courts.
statements and some communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Deputy, no further communications by ministers.
Communication by the clerk. Good. Bamboo? Bamboo Town? No further-
There are no further communications, Mr. Deputy. We're just talking about what will
Thank
take
you.
place
Thank you.
going through the agenda.
Communication by clerk. Message from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions.
We'll just Peter do his.
Presentations of reports of committees. Adoptions of reports of committees. First readings of bills. The chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahamas.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following. A bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money foreign towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue accounts for the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2020 and ending 30th June 2021.
What are the documents you brought up? Is there a seconder for the, being moved and seconded that the appropriations revenue accounts expense 2020, 2021 bill 2020 be read the first time? As many. Many in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money foreign towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year 1st of July 2020 and ending the 30th of June 2021.
Further first readings. The chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahamas.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following. A bill for an act for the appropriation of the sum of $515,524,579 for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for capital development for financial year ended 30 June 2021.
Been moved and seconded. Order the bill be brought up. Bill for Appropriation Capital Development 2021 bill. Being moved and seconded. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of the sums of $515,524,579 foreign towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for capital development for the financial year ending the 30th of June 2021.
Further reading of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following, a bill for an act to amend the Tariff Bill 2020.
Being moved and seconded. Order the bill be brought up. Tariff Amendment Bill 2020. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Tariff Bill.
What's the Tariff Act?
Further reading of bills. Further first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahamas.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Excise Act 2020.
The seconder. Order the bill be brought up. Excise Amendment Bill 2020 being moved and seconded. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. Order that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Excise Act 2020.
Further readings of first bill. Chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
The deputy rise to beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of a bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
Being moved and seconded. Order the bill be brought up. Value Added Tax Amendment Bill 2020. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
Further first reading of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the stamp tax.
Being moved and seconded. Order that the bill be brought up. Bill Stamp Amendment Bill 2020. Being moved and seconded. All members in favor who oppose and remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Stamp Tax Act, sorry.
Further first reading of bill. Chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Customs Management Act.
Being moved and seconded. Order that the bill be brought up. As many members are in favor of the bill remain seated. Those opposing will rise. It is ordered that the bill be read the first time. Order the bill be read.
A bill for an act to amend the Customs Management Act.
Further first readings of bill. Chair recognizes Grand Bahama.
Mr. Deputy, I rise to beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Business License Act.
Order the bill be brought up. Seconded. Being moved and seconded. Order that the bill be read the first time. As many members that are in favor as opposing will remain seated. Those in favor will rise. Sorry. As being moved and seconded. Members, as many members that are in favor of the bill remain seated. Those opposing will rise. I'm sorry, members. It's ordered that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Business License Act.
Further readings.
Mr. Deputy, I'm the one that's supposed to be tired. The Deputy, I beg leave to lay on the table introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Real Property Tax Act.
Being moved and seconded. Order that the bill be brought up. Many members are in favor opposing of the bill remain. Many members that remain, as many members are in favor of the bill remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Real Property Tax Act.
Further reading, first reading of bill.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the City of Nassau Revitalization Act.
Order is being moved in second. Order the bill be brought up. Many members that are in favor of the bill remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Order that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the City of Nassau Revitalization Act.
Further readings of first reading of bills.
Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act.
Bill is being seconded. Order the bill be brought up. Many members in favor of the bill remain seated. Those opposing will rise. It's ordered that the bill be read first.
A bill for an act to amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act.
En jag frågar.
First reading of bills.
Mr. Deputy, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to provide for the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to establish a public procurement department, promote transparency and integrity in public procurement, and for connected matters.
Been moved and seconded. Order the bill be brought up. All members in favor of the bill remain seated. Those opposing will rise. It's ordered that the bill be read the first time.
A bill for an act to provide for the framework and procedure for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to establish a public procurement department, to promote transparency and integrity in public procurement, and for connected matters.
Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
First reading. Okay, David.
Sean. David, we're going to
Hold on. Second reading.
second reading and committal of bills.
Third reading also.
Committal, second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the whole. Third readings and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. Member's statement. Chair recognizes the member for South Beach.
Mr. Deputy, just want to rise on behalf of the people of South Beach to offer congratulations in the first instance to the Mr. Latario Gardner, who was recently promoted in the recent promotion exercise with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And I wish to send also congratulations to his mother, Miss Bryce Turan, grandmother Delvira Richardson. Also want to extend congratulations to another South Beach resident of whom I am greatly familiar, Mr. Rosito Thomas, who is now entered into the senior ranks of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force as a petty officer. Mr. Thomas works out of our office in the Ministry of Education. Senior rate. I also wish Mr. Speaker to kindly send condolences and prayerful sympathies to the family of Mrs. Olga Roll of South Beach, to her son and daughters on her passing, a stalwart member of that South Beach community and the Bahamas at large. I wish to also extend our sympathies to those who were interred recently in Abaco in that recent memorial service, and for the many persons in our South Beach community who find these challenging and difficult times, and the great work that our team, led by our captains, Ms. Shirley Farrington, and our office staff, Raquel, in assisting by providing care packets and other amenities for our deserving residents. This will certainly continue over the ensuing weeks, Mr. Deputy, to bring relief much needed comfort to those in need. Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes the member for South and Central Mangrove Key Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. First, I too would like to extend my congratulations to members of the healthcare staff in the communities of South Central and Mangrove Key Andros, especially our nurses and ancillary staff members. Val Reming and the staff in South, Nurse Edgecombe and Stubbs in Central Andros, and Andrea Clark and all the nurses and healthcare staffs in Mangrove Key. Quickly moving on, I'd also like to thank the member for Kalani for his assistance in the crab industry, being able to move quickly, and for those who come into the province to sell their crabs and other wares to be able to return. I've asked the member for Kalani to simply look into a process that allows this process to be a much more customer-friendly one for those who are coming in from the Mike district in particular. Many of these are older persons who wouldn't want to get caught up in all the technical nuances of online, this and that, and want to simply go to a clinic, get maybe their pressure taken or what have you, and be able to get on another mail boat. When they come on the Captain Moxie, hit the Katrina and go back to Andros. They don't like being in town that long. I'm an island boy. So I want that process to be more seamless for my people in the community of Andros. And also against that same backdrop, Mr. Deputy, I would also like to say in life there is death. On the family of the late Mr. Freddie Pipe from Fresh Creek Andros, and those who would have served and been there with him, especially the Honorable R. Whitney Bastian and Klinger Johnson, Emily Miller, Shani and Dave Nemo and Dion Sweeting are just like a brother to him. And also yesterday, he was buried, by the way, Mr. Freddie Piper was buried yesterday in Freeport, Grand Bahama. And yesterday morning, I joined the Saunders family at the gravesite at Woodlawn Gardens, pardon me, for the homegoing for the late Deacon Harry Saunders of Mangrove Key. Henry Saunders of Mangrove Key. His son Harry is a good friend of mine, and his wife Sherelle. His other brother Linwood, who I'm very close with, and also his wife and the entire Saunders family of Mangrove Key, and also especially on behalf of Reverend King, Reverend George Clark, Reverend Moses Penniman, and others. They are saddened today on his passing. And as I wrap things up, also we'd like to extend it to my family, especially in the community of South Andros, and the passing of Ms. Lillian Forbes, who's also stalwart council of our party, especially to Rosa, and those who make up the community of High Rock, the Charles Johnson and family, Doris Kemp, Kanad Bethel, and also Steve Tracy Knowles and others in the High Rock community. Our thoughts and our prayers are with them. May their souls rest in eternal peace, but most profoundly we hope that it all rise in glory. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Thank you.
Member statement. The chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama.
Speaker, I would like to also express condolences to the family of Beecham Roberts, Carlton and Maria, and all the rest of the family on the passing of their father and grandfather. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to express a note of thanks, and I'm sure the Prime Minister did this himself, but to thank the former member Minister for Health for his guidance of the ministry and contributions to the government over the last 3 years. It's kind of interesting to see him on that side of the table, but I'm sure he'll make a contribution from that side equal to the contribution in the government and keep us on our toes. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to express a special happy anniversary to my dear wife, Sonia. I let her know that Engliston has a medal for her. It has been 32 years. Wow. I know I only look like I'm 32, but the silver and white is starting to betray me. But I do want to thank her for all of the support and contribution that she's made to my life, as well as to this constituency and political work since 8 years ago. People don't realize that this is a family commitment, and I can tell you, it ain't easy sometimes. I often have to restrain my children and tell them don't get in it, get them to do with them. But I certainly want to recognize and thank you. With social security, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for Marcos City. I can barely see beyond these masks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Just wanted to offer condolences to the Grant family on the passing of Nico Jr., a member of the Marco City constituency and an architect in our community, an outstanding, incredible young man who I could remember vividly speaking at his sister's funeral, who's made an incredible contribution to our community. And to let the Grant family know that we're praying for them, to Nana, to his wife and children, we love you. And to Lorna and her entire family on the passing of her mom, and all of the families now who are going through a period of grief. I also wanted to mention to residents of Marco City, we are continuing the food distribution, which we have been engaged in throughout the community, particularly with emphasis on senior citizens, persons with disability, and those persons who are from single families. So if you saw the bus come through your corner and went to particular homes, often we were going specifically to senior citizens or people who were differently able. But what we intend to do beginning this evening and of course throughout the next several weeks is we're going to consistently go door to door, observing social distancing. So please, if we don't see us hesitate, we come and drop off a package. We just want you to be safe and for our team to be safe. And so I just want to say a special thanks to the Marco City team who continue in these difficult times to engage in distribution. So I'll see you over the course of the next few days to continue the food distribution program.
As many, the chair recognizes the member for Yamakura.
First, I would just like to extend gratitude to the team in the great constituency of Yamakura. But before I go to that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize and thank the Immigration Department and all of those persons in that department who are on the front line, working extremely hard during the COVID-19 experience that we're still going through. And they continue to hold the line. They're not complaining. In particular, I would like to thank Mr. Sloan Smith and his executives, the president of the union that represents the Immigration Department and the Director of Immigration. And I would like to also thank them for embracing the whole concept of digitization. We're going cashless with the intent that every application is to be made online, pay online, and you get a contemporary response. Like the member just said, we're continuing to give out food packages and care packages in the Yamakura constituency and clean up. But we would like, my executive team has asked me to thank those persons who make that possible. Truth and fact is that we don't have the funding to do this as members of parliament, but there are those in the community who provide those packages for us to distribute. And so they don't ask for special recognition, but on behalf of the association, I would just like to say thank you very much. I would also like to send special recognition to my mother, who's in Dowds, Cat Island, and my aunts. Not being able to travel to them, and they don't really want anybody to travel to them anyhow. But to say that we're thinking about you. And so may God continue to bless and strengthen our Prime Minister and all of us, including the opposition, as we go through these trying times, facing two crises: the climate crisis that produced Dorian and the COVID-19 phenomenon that we're going through just now. Thank you very much.
I would just like, as many before any other members, I would just like to take this opportunity from where I sit now to also extend the people of Tall Pines and my family's condolences to Honorable Nico Grant and Ms. Grant on the passing of their son also. His daughter was my schoolmate and roommate in university. So when she died, it was very sad for me. And now hearing of his passing is another sad occasion. So we give our condolences. And I'm sure I speak for all of us here in this parliament also. I'd also like to, on behalf of people of Tall Pines, to say that we continue our food drive also. We've already did We've already done 3 mass food distribution drives and several private ones. We also want to encourage them to continue to call us at 824-6501. If you are in need of assistance, and that's only for the residents of Tall Pines, by the way, Bahamas. Yes, we want to continue to assist where we can. We also want to encourage you to participate in our online business boot camp. We're offering scholarships to try and encourage our members to get involved in small businesses, online businesses, as we go through this coronavirus. I encourage them to be safe, and the whole entire Bahamas to be safe. As many. Appointment of select committees, instructions to select committees, discharge of select committees, notice for future meetings. The chair recognizes the member for East Grand, Bahamas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to give notice of the following. A resolution authorizing the Minister of Finance to raise by way of a loan or loans the sum of $1,334,243,433.
Order the resolution be brought up.
Do I need to read the whole resolution? Do I need to read the whole resolution? Do I need to read the whole resolution?
Okay, sorry, member for East Grand, Bahamas.
Yeah, sorry. Whereas Article 129(1) of the Constitution requires the Minister of Finance before the end of each financial year to cause to be prepared annual estimates of revenue and expenditure for public service during the succeeding fiscal year, which shall be laid before the House of Assembly and which estimates have been laid before the House of Assembly. And whereas it is necessary to undertake additional borrowing to finance the deficiency of revenue over expenditure in the 2020-2021 estimates of revenue and expenditure, which have been laid before the House of Assembly. And whereas Section 4 of the Bahamas Registered Stock Act 362 prescribes the conditions under which the Minister of Finance may raise any sum of money or part thereof by the creation and issuance of registered stock. And whereas from time to time the House of Assembly has approved for borrowings by way of loan agreements with banks, including commercial banks and institutional and international financial institutions, to finance approved expenditure. And whereas Section 3 of the Development Loans Act 382 prescribes the conditions under which the Minister of Finance may borrow monies externally or internally in currency of the United States of America, effected and secured by the issue and sale of bonds. And whereas by Section 18 of the Financial Administration and Audit Act 2010, number 26 of 2010, it is provided that no loan shall be raised by the government, and no guarantee involving a financial liability shall be binding upon the government unless entered into with the prior approval, signified by resolution of the House of Assembly thereof. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, 1, authorizes the Minister of Finance to raise by way of loan or loans the sum of $1,334,243,433 in such currency as the Minister may determine. 2, authorize the Minister to raise such amounts by way of A, creation and issuance of registered stock under Section 4 of the Bahamas Registered Stock Act, Chapter 362. B, loan agreements with banks, including commercial banks and international financial institutions, on such terms as are mutually agreed. And C, the issue and sale of bonds under Section 3 of the Development Loan Act, Chapter 382. Subject to the provisions that the sum borrowed under paragraphs A to C does not exceed the sum of $1,334,243,433, except such amounts as may be necessary to amortize or refinance existing debt, and the House receives communication from the Minister of Finance at the earliest opportunity after the apportionment amongst paragraph A, B, and C. And 3, approve the proceeds of the said loans being used for the purpose of defraying expenditure in the 2020-2021 estimates of revenue and expenditure in excess of revenue.
Order that the document be brought up. Order the document do line the table. Chair recognizes the member for Babuchang.
Mr. Deputy, we were hoping to be able to be out here by 1 o'clock, but I rise to move that the business of this House do continue beyond 1 p.m. today.
Been moved and seconded that the business of this House carry on beyond the 1 o'clock hour. Many members in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Business of this House carry on beyond 1 p.m. As many. The chair recognizes the member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give notice that at the next sitting of the House tomorrow, I will move the following resolution. Whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General made a proclamation of emergency. Hereinafter, the proclamation dated 17th of March 2020, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas. And whereas, pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the proclamation ceases to be enforced at the expiration of a period of 14 days beginning on the date on which it was made, or such longer period as may be approved under paragraph 5 of Article 29 of the Constitution. And whereas Article 29(5) of the Constitution provides for the continuance in force of a proclamation if at any time while the proclamation is in force, a resolution is passed by each House of Parliament approving its continuance in force for a further period not exceeding 6 months, beginning on the date on which it would otherwise expire. The proclamation shall, if not sooner revoked, continue in force for that period. And whereas, pursuant to Article 29(5) of the Constitution, a resolution hereinafter, the first resolution, was passed by each House of Parliament on the 30th day of March 2020, which approved the continuance in force of the proclamation for a further period of 8 days until the 8th day of April 2020. And whereas, pursuant to Article 29(5) of the Constitution, a resolution hereinafter, the second resolution, was passed in each House of Parliament on the 6th of April 2020, which approved the continuance in force of the proclamation for a further period of 22 days until the 30th day of April 2020. And whereas, pursuant to Article 29(5) of the Constitution, a resolution hereinafter, the third resolution, was passed by each House of Parliament on the 27th day of April 2020, which approved the continuance in force of the proclamation for a further period of 30 days until the 30th day of May 2020. Whereas, pursuant to Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, Chapter 34, hereinafter the Act, the Governor General made the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020 on the 17th day of March 2020. And whereas, Section 3(3) of the Act provides that emergency regulations may empower such authorities or persons as may be specified in the regulations to make orders and rules for any of the purposes for which such regulations are authorized by the Act to be made and may contain such incidental and supplementary provisions as appear to the Governor General to be necessary or expedient for the purposes of the regulations. Whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020 empowers the competent authority to make such orders. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 number 2, Order 2020, was made by the competent authority on the 23rd day of March 2020. And whereas Section 5(1) of the Act provides that all emergency regulations, if not sooner revoked, shall cease to have effect when the proclamation of emergency in pursuance of which they have been made ceases to have effect. And whereas, pursuant to Section 5(2) of the Act,
By the first resolution, each House of Parliament affirms the continuance and effect of Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020 and Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 2 Order 2020. And whereas pursuant to the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020, the Competent Authority made the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Special Provisions Order 2020 on the 30th day of March 2020. And whereas pursuant to Section 5.2 of the Act, by the second resolution, each House of Parliament affirmed the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 2 Order 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Special Provisions Order 2020. And whereas pursuant to Section 5.2 of the Act, by the third resolution, each House of Parliament affirmed the continuance in each of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 2 Order 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Special Provisions Order 2020. And whereas Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 3 Order 2020 was made by the Competent Authority on the 8th day of May 2020 and revoked Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 2 Order. And whereas the existence of a state of public emergency in the Bahamas as a result of the presence and effect of COVID-19 in the Bahamas continues. And whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety, the defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to the life and well-being of the community to continue in force. The Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulation 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 3 Order 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approves the continuance of the proclamation made on the 17th of March 2020 until the 29th day of June 2020. B, affirms the continuance in effect of Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020 made on the 17th day of March 2020 until the 29th day of June 2020. C, affirms the continuance and effect of Emergency Powers COVID-19 Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 30th day of March 2020 until the 29th day of June 2020. And D, affirms the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Number 3 Order 2020 made on the 8th day of May 2020 until the 29th day of June 2020. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow we will debate this resolution, and we will have the opportunity tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, to further extend the liberalization and free movement of certain sectors in the Bahamas, if you recognize that individuals may have been under lockdown curfew order for some time, and we think we're on the right track. We think we're in good stead if we were to further liberalize the Bahamas, that is both New Providence, Grand Bahama, and other family islands. And more details, Mr. Speaker, inclusive of the church, as we all need spiritual healing, not only medical healing, and not only economic healing, but more details would be given tomorrow as to the layout as we continue to progress along our phase 1, phase 1B, phase 2, 3, as we continue to advance so that we can open country or international travels, so that our Minister of Tourism in one day start shouting in the back of me, saying that he has now hit the 9 million mark. And I look forward to that day, Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, before I sign this notice, I want to extend condolence to Nico Grant, who has served in this Parliament not only as a member of Parliament, but a minister who had lost his son. But Nico had gone through such trials and disaster previously when he had lost his daughter, and he and his son had essentially adopted his daughter's son, a child, and had done an excellent job. And now that Nico's son has passed on, Nico now has the awesome responsibility, both he and his wife, to now continue with the upbringing of his grandchild. And watching how he has performed in adopting his grandchild some years earlier, I am certain that he will continue to lead his grandson in the right and proper direction. And one day, just as Nico had made his contribution to this society, one day I'm certain that his grandson would probably be in the same manner and would make his positive contribution.
What are the documents we brought up? What are the documents do lie on the table? Further notices? Chair recognizes Kalani.
Speaker, on the 27th of April, I should have tabled this document, laid this document on the table, and I today want to lay this document put up to the House.
What are the documents you brought up? David. He didn't need to sign this thing. The bar. Yeah. What are the documents do lie on the table? I mean the last page. Further notices? The chair recognizes the members of South and Central Andres.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I wouldn't like to be the one to hold up the midday report on the ZNS network any longer than it should be, but I'd like to note that I was very concerned about the level almost of timidity and almost a sense of uncertainty coming from the member for Kalani as the Prime Minister. In his presentation of the report, the resolution we'll be discussing tomorrow, but we look forward to tomorrow. He just very calm and had me a little concerned as he presented and read the resolution today. But also we look forward to a very lively discussion tomorrow as we look at the resolution tomorrow. And so I must say that I too would like to commend the member for Elizabeth, who would have served. I know it's not easy, but this is a place where you must know when to hold them and to fold them, and that's the way it is in political life sometimes. So we want to commend you, sir. And it's good to have you on our side now. God is a good God. And also like to say quickly, and all notices standing in the name of the opposition remain. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Which one, Chairman? Chair recognizes Don Bhutan.
Mr. Speaker, following behind my homeboy from South Andros, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, I'm tempted, but today I shall yield not to temptation.
Thank you.
For yielding is sin. But, Mr. Deputy, I rise to renew all matters in the name of the government and signals to this House that we shall return tomorrow, 10 a.m., Thursday, the 28th of May, 2020.
Being moved and seconded, House be adjourned to 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, the 28th of May, 2020. As many members are in favor, remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Final adjournment.
Mr. Deputy, I do now move that the House adjourns until tomorrow, Thursday, the 28th of May, 2020 at 10 a.m.
Being moved and seconded that the House be adjourned at 10 o'clock, the 28th of May, 2020. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. The House stands adjourned.